Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Henry VIII's Secret Assassins. Throughout his time on the throne, Henry VIII made a huge number of enemies. When he split from Rome, the Pope and the Catholic Church, he feared invasion from Europe greatly, to the point where he created a huge network of castles and forts along the south coast of England. But the king was rather sneaky in his attempts to silence a number of his enemies, especially those within England and Scotland where they could be got at. It was during Elizabeth I's reign, Henry's daughter, that she utilised a network of spies and informants with Francis Walsingham, acting as the spymaster. This was incredibly advanced for the time, but Henry VIII himself utilised a number of paid assassins and murderers who could neutralise the enemy of England. Some would even willingly travel across the continent to take out European targets. But who were these men who carried out the attacks on behalf of the king? One man who made a huge amount of enemies inside of Scotland was Cardinal Beaton, who worked as the Lord Chancellor of Scotland between 1543 and 1546. He was incredibly Catholic, and he angered a huge number of Scotland's Protestants after he arrested a friar named John Rogers, who preached sermons that he deemed were heretical. Rogers was imprisoned in St Andrew's Castle, and then he continued to attack Protestants, with John Knox speaking out about the order he gave to burn Knox's teacher, George Wyatt, at the stake. However, David Beaton's biggest enemy was King Henry VIII, and he was incredibly staunch in his vocal outrage for the King of England. He was furious with the way Henry was trying to seek more power in Scotland. Cardinal Beaton also helped one of the Pope's ambassadors escape kidnap after Henry VIII's men were seeking him, but Henry VIII ordered a group of secret assassins to silence the rebel Scottish cardinal. On the 29th of May 1546, 17 assassins who had been paid by Henry VIII in secret broke into St Andrew's Castle. Whilst inside the fortification, they caused chaos, murdering the castle's porter and then throwing the body out of the castle's walls and into the ditch to be displayed. They then found Cardinal Beaton, their main target, and whilst he was hiding in his bedroom, they dragged him around the castle and stabbed him numerous times in what was a hugely bloody scene. It was said Cardinal Beaton's mutilated corpse was dangled from a window, a brutal and humiliating fate. One of the most powerful Catholic figures in Scotland had been brutally mutilated and murdered on the secret orders of Henry VIII, and Henry continued to deny that he had been involved, saying that this was not the business of a king. But the way Henry VIII had paid secret assassins to carry out his wrath was genius, and he had escaped any further action for it. Henry in England would put his enemies to the sword whenever he felt like it. For example, he even ordered the execution of his once best and closest advisor, Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell had made him a huge sum of money from the dissolution of the monasteries, but following Henry's failed fourth marriage, Cromwell fell from favour, and his enemies at court dug their talons in, and Henry then executed even those who were once close to him. Henry would go further in law, even extending the Tudor treason laws, meaning that a huge number of people would die accused of the most serious offence, treason even including poisoning foods of someone, and the punishment of this was burning alive. Henry VIII was not the most subtle man, and he was neither the most diplomatic either, but he would even ask his assassins to cross into other lands to carry out acts of murder, and some would even go as far as Europe. One of Henry VIII's biggest worries and targets was Cardinal Reginald Pole, who was very vocal in his opposition to the English king's changes to the church. Henry regarded him as the worst traitor, and he even ordered the imprisonment of Pole's elderly mother, Margaret, who was one of the last remaining members of the Plantagenet dynasty. Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury, actually had a claim to the English throne, and Henry VIII would eventually order her execution. And she was hacked to bits by a blundering and wretched axeman on the cobbled stones of the Tower of London. But Reginald Pole escaped a number of assassination attempts, and he was one of many Catholics who fled England as the Reformation continued at great haste. These Catholics, it was feared, would do great damage overseas to eventually return. and bring down the king's changes to religion, and he believed Pole would start a rebellion. One man who was a friend of Pole's was Robert Brancetor, and it was said he was now in Italy, devising Henry VIII's destruction and persuading princes to levy war against the king. With this, Catholics were plotting the king's downfall from Europe and were petitioning royalty to declare war on England. Sir Thomas Wyatt found out that Brancetor was in France accompanying the powerful Charles V of Spain, and it was said that Brancetor was a man of small quality who had been a merchant's factor and robbed his master, and since had conspired against Henry. There was no one that bore more malice to the king than he. The plan was to snatch Brancetor and then bring him back to England to face charges, or even Wyatt may have considered taking him out there and then. Wyatt and another man went to Brancetor's house and tried to get in, but Wyatt then fell and injured himself. When they entered, Brancetor was shocked, and Wyatt tried to grab some letters on a table, but then they were thrown in a fire. Brancetor claimed he was a servant of the Spanish king and asked to be taken to him, but a French official asked the Spanish king what he should do. Charles debated whether to extradite him, and he told Wyatt that he would not agree to this, and Brancetor was freed, and he linked up with Reginald Pole in Rome. On this occasion, he escaped assassination and death. But a number of traitors who Henry VIII wanted to punish were very, very slippery and elusive, and one such man was Gregory Dudley, the son of Lord Dudley. He had fled England, disguised as a worker, and he went to live in Calais. He travelled on to Paris and was later found by Sir William Paget, one of Henry VIII's diplomats. Paget had a warrant for Dudley's extradition and to imprison him, and Dudley made a rush treason confession on the paper. But Dudley, whilst under Paget's custody, managed to escape 9 days later, and he looked stupid in front of the king for this. 2 English agents inside of Europe then tried to hunt him down, and they were found in Milan. The question as to whether they should kill him or arrest him. But the problem was, in Italy, it was incredibly difficult to arrest him due to the influence of the Pope, and the fact Henry and the Pope at this time were sworn enemies. Dudley slipped the net yet again, but was caught and imprisoned before he yet again managed to escape from Milan Castle. It's clear that Henry VIII would have been very, very angry at these slip-ups, with men paid to go and arrest the traitors, or even kill them and bring them back to England. Henry even hired Italian soldiers and a mercenary to kill Reginald Pole. Colonel Dillamy was dispatched to Venice, but working against him and the English king was the Pope's own intelligence network. They found out why he was in Venice, to kill Reginald Pole, and Pole refused to attend a church council one time as he feared for his life that the Italian forces would kill him and dispatch him. The Catholic Church then hired 13 assassins to take out Lamy before he managed to get to Pole, but this did not work. It was known that the Italian colonel was going to carry out an attack, and it was expected, and the Pope even claimed that Henry deserved 1,000 deaths for dispatching a villain to Italy to carry out murder. Lamy was involved in a fight with a Venetian night watchman, and as he wounded him, he was then liable to execution. But Lamy went further than his assigned targets, hiring other mercenaries to attack other officers. One of these attacks was an Italian banker named Maffeo Bernardo, who was stabbed 18 times. But let's remember that the Italian colonel, like the men who stabbed the Scottish Cardinal to death, was working for the English king. One of Henry VIII's biggest regrets was that he did not bring Cardinal Reginald Pole, the arch-traitor, back to England. He managed to escape and live out the rest of his life, even returning to England. But the men who were doing the bidding and brutal work for Henry VIII were his secret network of assassins. I am sure that there were more attacks ordered on the enemies of the English king, and that there were many more men working as assassins for Henry VIII. We know that Henry VIII is ultimately a brutal and bloody king, and that he would have stopped at nothing to have had his own way. Seeing his enemies alive would not have pleased him at all. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.